Welcome everyone to a brand new episode of the Theatre Thoughts podcast. Today I have a very special guest joining me. We have an independent artist and producer who's worked across theatre, comedy, musical theatre, cabaret and storytelling. They've toured extensively in Australia, New Zealand and the UK, curating events and cabaret nights and festivals, written plays for Belvoir St, including Blessed Union, which I loved seeing, published a book and completed a playwright fellowship. And she was most recently seen at the Sydney Writers' Festival discussing bringing plays from the stage to the page. It's Maeve Marsden. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Finally, I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm thrilled to have you.
This is this magical lag that we're talking about. We're like awkward people floating in a foyer waiting for the next person to talk.
Oh my God, yeah. And you're just like, oh, are they talking? Am I talking?
Who's next?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for jumping on and having a chat. We're talking about the Adelaide Cabaret Festival today and the performance that you're taking part in, which is Homage. And then obviously I'm just keen to hear more about yourself, really. The more I read about you, the more I go, I'd love to just pick your brain on all different things.
Go for it.
Well, I guess the first thing is to just introduce yourself, really, for those who, don't really know your name or aren't familiar with your work. Give me a quick snapshot of who is Maeve Marsden.
I wish that I was somebody who had a singular enough focus that I could just say, well, I'm a director or I'm a writer. I've always just followed things that interest me. So I tend to now just say I'm a theatre maker and producer. But as I was saying to you before we started recording, I'm now the director of a writers' festival, the Blue Mountains Writers' Festival. So, I guess broadly speaking, I make work with a view to reaching an audience. Like that is the best encapsulation that I can do. But basically I toured cabaret quite consistently for about a decade, small indie shows that we would take to fringe festivals in Australia and overseas and comedy festivals. And then eventually as profile grew, the bigger arts festivals. So toured a few different productions like that. I've produced a queer storytelling night called Queer Stories, which is probably what most people know me from because I've been doing that for 8 or 9 years, which does writers' festivals, but I also, especially prior to the pandemic, was doing it every month in multiple cities. So that's been a huge part of my life is kind of queer storytelling and big events for kind of community. But I've also done just 12 million little projects. As you say, I wrote a play for Belvoir. I directed a musical for The Haze. I edited a magazine for the ABC. I made a podcast with Google Creative Labs. If someone comes to me and is like, this is interesting, and especially for me, if it centers women or queer voices or it's inventive and often quite joyful, like I don't make super, super serious work or funny, then I follow my nose and that's how I make work. And it's been really beautiful. So I got to freelance making work and collaborating with people for about 10 years and have just taken a job as the creative director of Varuna, the National Writers' House, which is a writers' residency in Katoomba and the Blue Mountains Writers' Festival, but still freelancing. As you see, I can't stay away. So I'm like doing Homage for Adelaide Cabaret Festival. I go to Bundanon on the weekend for Queer Stories, like cannot stay away.
I love that because I've just recently sort of put my head first into the freelancing world myself. So it's a bit of a journey. It's been a real shake up for me. Go from like full-time work to freelance work.
Oh wow,
so I'm just like, oh my God, what is this world? And it's I love that. I love that you're doing all these little things because I really resonate with that.
Yeah, though I remember a friend of mine, Ellie Baxter, said the thing about freelancing is you can always take a break and you can never take a break.
Yeah. That's like, I love that. That is perfect. So good. Well, I think, when was the first time we met? It was either at Blessed Union or it was at Into the Woods. It was one of the two.
It was at Into the Woods. I've been too anxious at Blessed Union to talk to anyone.
That would have made sense.
We met at Into the Woods because I harassed you because I decided you looked like Dom Mercer from Belvoir. I was like, are you his brother? Because I have the kind of personality where I do that to people.
It was such a funny night because that's like, I think Tim Minchin had just walked past me in the aisle and he was like asking if the seat next to me was his seat. And I was like kind of being like, oh yeah, sure, Tim, you can sit there if you want. And then like afterwards, like you were like, oh, do you know Don Mercer? And I was like, what is going on? Why is everyone? I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is Maeve
famous
Marsden.
people, Tim Minchin and Maeve Marsden.
And I was like, I'm pretty sure that's Maeve Marsden. And who do I look like? And then you pointed like across the board, and I was like, oh, I think I do look like this guy. It was very funny.
Anyway. So I met you then. I still try to get along to as many openings as I can, but I did have a toddler and moved to the Blue Mountains, so it becomes less easy than it used to be.
Yeah, exactly. Well, before we go, I guess, too far into let's then jump back and we'll talk about the Adelaide Cabaret, which is coming to Adelaide in June, 17th to 22nd of June, headed, of course, by the one and only Miss Virginia Gay, who's heading the cabaret, which could not have chosen a better person for the year, to be honest.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, truly perfect.
And you're performing Homage at the cabaret this year. And I think you're doing other stuff as well. You're not just doing Homage, are you?
No, I'm just going down for Homage.
Oh, you are?
Like
Homage. Sorry.
Homage. Either works. No, I'm just going down for Homage. I will end up, no doubt, wandering over to Trevor's piano bar and singing some show tunes and going into Vicky's late night show and forcing her to let me do a spot. Like once you're there, you always end up doing 12 million other things. But no, Homage is just a one lineup show on one afternoon that we're doing in the Dunstan Playhouse. And so it's myself and Victoria Falconer hosting.
Oh, lovely.
And it's all LGBTQI plus artists performing covers or, in cabaret, there are always reinventions, of their favourite queer artists. So we've each taken songs that mean something to us by queer artists, queer ones, not icons. So it's not like Kylie and, and Cher. It's like Tracy Chapman and of course, every other queer artist has fallen out of my head. Who's everyone singing? Oh, we've got some Scissor Sisters. We've got Kim Petras. We've got, Tracy Chapman. We've got the strangest mashup that Vicky's going to do that people will be shocked and delighted by. And so, but we're all on stage together. So we kind of build it. It's a lineup show, but it's also we're all in on each other and singing backing vocals. And we've got Queen Kong, Brenda McLean, Malika and Falme, Virginia Gay's bound to pop up and sing something. And, of course, beautiful Mama Alto is coming across from Nam. And so, so that'll be a really lovely show. I love the Adelaide Cabaret Festival. This is my third time and I just love it.
Is it? I'm really guilty. I don't like saying this, but I've never been to Adelaide or to any of the festivals down there.
What?
Awful. I know.
You call yourself theatre thought.
I know, and I was gonna go this year, but I couldn't line everything up, so I feel like a bad person.
Adelaide is just a phenomenon. Audiences there are different because of that festival culture. Audiences will show up for artists, comedians they do not know in a way that I've not seen in any other city.
Really?
Even Melbourne in the Comedy Festival, it's not the same. Like people just seem to wander in Adelaide, and the Cabaret Festival slightly less so than Fringe, obviously. But even then, I always get audiences in Adelaide that are different kind of demographically from everywhere else. And the Cabaret Festival is this fascinating phenomenon because you've got all the kind of like fringe carnies and musical theatre types and like a particular subset of the arts.
Really?
And they put us all in a nice hotel for a few weeks, or a weekend. And the hotel's right next to the venue, and it's just this kind of quite luxe performance experience. And everyone stays up at like when I went last time, we all were around the like piano in the hotel bar, like singing until like 4 a.m. And then a bunch of us last time I was there, like as an artist, it's a really joyful experience. It was like Bridie Connell and Lou Wall and like a mixed bag of like comedians and performers, Auntie Johnny, and we decided we were going to stage a photo shoot in the hotel, and we all got dressed up like either 80s businessmen or their wives and did our full cabaret face and put on white dressing gowns and ran around the hotel staging photo shoots of us like drinking champagne in the gym and lying on the staircase and like in the shower, and spent hours being hideously irritating theatre kids in costume for no reason except our own pleasure. I was chatting to Brady Connell about it the other day, and we were like, that was one of the best days of my life. Like,
I bet. I'm jealous just hearing about it.
it was so dorky, but we had so much fun.
I
And
haven't been a rat bag of a theatre kid in years, and I
it
miss
was
it.
great. I mean, you're not in the arts for the money. You've got to be in it for the absolutely absurd joy.
Yeah, exactly. At least you can say you lived, hey?
Yeah.
I think with Homage as well, you am I correct in saying that you did it at the Hayes recently? Yeah, that's right.
Homage is a concept that's had a weird life. Like, it originated, I want to say, 12 years ago with a beautiful guy called Brett Miller, who now lives in New York. And we produced it, and it was kind of his baby, and we produced it together with a lineup in like a little theatre in Marrickville, Sidetrack. And then years passed, and a while later I got back in touch with him and said, I love doing that. Do you mind if I keep doing it? And I did one at the Factory in 2018 with a brilliant lineup, and we packed the Factory out. So like, 450 or something, big, beautiful show. And then I did one for Mardi Gras a couple of years later, because it's a big piece, because you're kind of rearranging songs for a really big lineup. There's a band. So you can't sort of just produce it all the time. And then there was a pause, and the Hayes put it on for Mardi Gras this year. So we did a kind of pared back version at the Hayes with just piano, though when it's Vicky Falconer, it's piano, accordion, violins. Yeah. I got my violin out for the first time in 8 years.
Amazing.
And played with Vicky. And so that was a really beautiful show, and I had pitched it to Adelaide. So we'll revive it there. So it's one of those things that's a really beautiful show when I can bring the pieces together for it to happen. And it's a really nice combination of queer storytelling, because everybody talks about the songs they've chosen, and obviously music, which is the other part of my love and life.
I've recently had the pleasure of talking to Victoria Falconer, and just like, because I've been like obviously very aware of how amazingly talented she is in like one finger. And then I've recently bumped into her at the Hayes a couple of times, and I'm just like, she's the most lovely person to talk to.
Delightful.
Like,
well, look, I've said this. She's got the best mental health of anyone I've ever met. She's lovely to everyone. She's incredibly talented. I don't know what stars aligned, but we had been circulating each other for years through kind of fringe festivals, but didn't know each other.
Oh, wow.
But both were doing kind of feminist cabaret stuff in different ways. And then we only first worked together when I directed Lizzie at the Hayes at the start of 2022. Yeah. And Richard put us in touch. Richard Carroll was like, she can be your musical director. And we just immediately really hit it off and became friends. And so we'd been looking for something else we could do together. And so we started to produce, well, I produce and she musically directs. And then we both host Homage, and we're also trying to write a musical together.
Oh, my God.
With all Africa.
Oh, that's exciting.
Us and Rebecca Shaw. Do you know Rebecca Shaw, or are you just deeply theatre and not comedy land?
The name rings a bell. I've dove into the theatre, the comedy world a lot recently, and I really love the comedy world.
She's a comedy writer. She's not a stand-up. So she writes for TV a lot, and so it's based on some writing of hers, and it's about sort of a lesbian climate activist cult.
Oh, tick, tick, tick.
It makes sense. It makes sense in our mind.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see. I mean, you can get away with a lot in a musical.
Of course you can. Yeah.
You can get away with so very much that would not make sense in any other form. And then you can get away with even more in cabaret.
Yeah. Well, actually, speaking of cabaret, I'd love to ask you, because obviously, like we've established, you do so many different things. What is it that keeps bringing
Frozen
you back
again.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Am I back? Am I back? Am I moving?
You froze.
Oh no, I can see you.
Speaking of cabaret.
Oh, what a climax! Can you hear me now? Am I back?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry, I was like just waving my hands weirdly. The Patreon people are going to love this episode. It's going to be great.
I love it. I love it.
Yes, what I was saying. Speaking of cabaret, I'd like to ask you, because we've established that you have a lot of fingers and a lot of pies. What keeps bringing you back to cabaret?
Look, the joke answer I used to give was that I wasn't a good enough actor to be an actor. I wasn't a funny enough comedian to be a comedian, and I wasn't a good enough singer to be a musical theatre performer. So I just was like, jack of all trades, master of none. Cabaret is the sweet spot between those. And look, partly that's a joke. Partly it's that cabaret cabaret is something you can sort of invent and make yourself. You don't have to go knocking on doors asking for permission to be cast in something. You just make shows and you put them in strange places. But I think there's also something about its immediacy for me. You know, you mentioned in my bio that I'd published a book. I really didn't like that experience, really, because once it's done, you can't change it.
Yeah.
And even with theatre on some level, like the actors can adapt each night. But cabaret, when you're in it and you've made it, you can respond in the moment, and you can respond into the moment to what the audience is looking for, and what you want to give them, and how the interaction is functioning, and how big your venue is, and how your voice is feeling that night, you know, like in a way that, say, with a musical, if you start reinventing the song, and you're not a soloist, you know. And so to me, it has always felt like a really human and immediate form, and with such a beautiful political history and such a beautiful history of kind of subversion and togetherness and kind of community. And so, so I joke about it in a self-deprecating way, but really it's something else. It's something about doing it that always feels magic. And even when I'm doing storytelling nights like Queer Stories and there isn't music, it still feels like that to me. Like it still feels like a conversation and making work with a community in mind, not just an audience.
Yeah. What a beautiful answer. That's really wholesome. Well done.
Well, wholesome's this thing I get about my work all the time.
Yeah?
Wholesome. I think it's always kind of meant you make us feel good, but you're old and uncool. But also like your work has, even if you're pushing me, you're hugging me while pushing me. Like it's this kind of, I don't break boundaries in a way that makes people uncomfortable. I try to bring people in. I try to go, look, I want you to think outside the box, but I'm giving you a little pat while it happens. I've got like a mum vibe.
That's a beautiful image when you think about it. Like I can really picture that. The little hug's like, come on, no, stay with me.
Yeah, I'm not edgy. I'm wholesome.
Yeah, wholesome. Well, I'd love to ask you a final question. It's a question I ask everyone who comes on, and I'd love to know how you, in your time, how you think the industry's changed, the theatre industry's changed, and how you've adapted and found your place in that change, I guess. It's a bit of a big question, so if you need
it's a really big question. Like it's hard not to immediately go to quite depressing stuff about like money. Because in a blunt way, it feels like all our costs are going up, but you cannot justify increasing ticket prices at the same rate. And if you do, your work becomes inaccessible. So there is this way in which making work is harder and harder. And in really blunt terms, like say Queer Stories has probably the broadest awareness it's had in its whole life, but is not as profitable as it was 5 years ago in terms of what I can pay myself for my time and what and I'm paying performers more than I was 5 years ago. But that means that I'm taking a hit. And that's kind of negative and it's unfortunate. But it's a reality of kind of cost of living, and I may be wholesome in the work I make, but my politics are that we really do need to burn down most of our systems and start again. Capitalism is not serving the making of art. And so that's the kind of depressing part, and it's the part that it's really hard as makers to know how to address, because we don't want to cut out audiences who can't afford extremely expensive tickets. We don't want to pay artists less, but costs are just going up and up and up. That make it very hard. At the same time, I think the work I'm seeing is way more sort of inventive and exciting than I was seeing 10 years ago in lots of ways, in terms of, on a really basic level. When we first started touring a show and calling it a feminist cabaret, people were like, oh, don't put that in your marketing. Nobody will come to that. And that's like 15 years ago. And now, and I mean, obviously that was wrong, but that was a kind of mainstream attitude, and that would never happen now. They're like, which box can we tick, friend? Which has its own problems. Like box ticking diversity and inclusion stuff is its own complicated phenomenon that cannot be answered in a single podcast.
Oh, no way. No.
But I am thrilled. I am thrilled to see stories making it to the stage from artists who would not have had a platform 15 years ago, who just wouldn't have. And I'm glad that some of the shows I made are probably outdated politically.
Yeah, right. Well, Maeve, thank you so much for jumping on and having a chat with me. I've absolutely adored this. I'm glad we could finally line it up. But I'm so excited for you to debut. I'm going to say it right this time, to debut Homage.
Fromage, like fromage.
At the
On le
Adelaide Festival.
français.
Yeah, Adelaide Cabaret Festival, I should say.
Yeah.
Get it right. But thank you so much for giving me your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.